This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The conflict in Nahr al-Bared has barely ended for a new wave of violence to erupt in Ain al-Halwa refugee camp. This news comes after a Salafi group named Jund al-Sham opened fire on a Lebanese security checkpoint. The new clashes in Ain al-Halwa refugee camp have reignited the already tense security situation in the country. The overnight confrontations, which stopped for a few hours after some Palestinian factions mediated the situation, resumed this morning. The clashes have left at least 5 people dead, including 2 Lebanese soldiers, 2 fighters from Jund al-Sham, and 1 civilian. Abdul Latif Omar reports.
The security situation in Nahr al-Bared is still tense as a new wave of violence erupted in Ain al-Halwa refugee camp. The overnight clashes began after fighters from a radical group known as Jund al-Sham carried out an attack on Lebanese security positions, killing 2 soldiers and injuring 6 others. 2 fighters from Jund al-Sham were also killed and 3 others were wounded in the clashes. In addition, 1 civilian was killed and 2 others were wounded in the violence, which also resulted in substantial property damage. During daylight and after a long night of bombardment, the new outlook of the Palestinian battered neighborhoods in the largest refugee camp was evident to the residents.
As you can see, this building was hit and damaged. Several other buildings in the neighborhood were also damaged. The entire street was devastated.
Amidst the loud noise of gunfire and explosions, street confrontations erupted in Ain al-Halwa refugee camp and quickly spread from one neighborhood to another. The overnight confrontations stopped for a few hours after Palestinian mediators in the camp were able to broker a ceasefire. However, the ceasefire did not hold and a new wave of violence erupted during early morning hours. In anticipation for a worst-case scenario, the Lebanese army was deployed fully in and around the refugee camp. Meanwhile, the residents started to make preparations for a new wave of exodus towards the largest southern Lebanese city of Sidon.
Many believe that this news will exacerbate the already deteriorating security situation in Lebanon, especially considering the fact that Ain al-Halwa is the largest Palestinian refugee camp in the area, in size and population. A year after the Palestinian catastrophe unfolded in 1948, Ain al-Halwa was established in the suburbs of Sidon in southern Lebanon. Its current population ranges between 45,000 and 60,000 people, mostly refugees who fled in the aftermath of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Ain al-Halwa, which stretches over 1 square kilometer, is the home to many Palestinian factions, with Fatah maintaining control in the camp. However, many radical groups, including Salafis, were able to establish positions in the camp, especially during the past few years. One of those radical groups, which were able to take positions in the Ain al-Halwa refugee camp, was Jund al-Sham. Jund al-Sham was founded nearly 3 years ago by a man named Abu Yusuf Sharqiya. Jund al-Sham came to the political spotlight in Lebanon after claiming responsibility for the killing of a Hezbollah senior leader in the southern suburb of Beirut. The name of Jund al-Sham is often associated with a group link to the late Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Like Takfiris, Jund al-Sham members believe in violence as a solution and adhere to the ideology of armed struggle in changing regimes and establishing an Islamic caliphate-style nation.
As
a result of the continued clashes between the Lebanese army and the Fatah al-Islam organization, Palestinian refugees who have fled Nahar al-Bared refugee camp continue to suffer. More than 200 families have fled to Burj al-Barajni camp in the southern suburb of Beirut. Meanwhile, efforts are being made to improve the conditions of refugees, whose main demands are to return to their homes in the Nar al-Bared refugee camp.
Perhaps Nasser can sense his mother's anxiety without knowing the reasons why. Her husband refused to leave Nahr al-Bared refugee camp, so Nuha had to leave the camp with their 7 children. She and her in-laws headed to Burj al-Barajni refugee camp.
The most important thing is to return to our homes and be safe there. This is more important than anything else.
After a long journey of displacement from Nahr al-Bared camp in northern Lebanon, they ended up at the Palestinian Burj al-Barajni refugee camp in the southern suburb of Beirut.
These 5 families have 5 homes. Each of them, their wives and children were living in their own homes. Meanwhile, all of us are now living here together in 2 rooms. Honestly, last night, 23 people were sleeping in this home.
Their miserable living conditions are not as bad as other families who fled to nearby homes in Burj al-Barajni. Some people say that the responsibility of dealing with the miserable conditions of the displaced Nahr al-Bared refugees must not fall on the shoulders of only one side, Lebanese or Palestinian. Rather, international and Arab organizations, as well as Palestinian factions and the country of Lebanon, must combine their efforts. Arab political, civic, and popular leaders are trying to work with Lebanese and Palestinian fronts to provide effective and quick relief to thousands of displaced people.
The situation depends on capabilities and on finding a quick and long-lasting resolution. Perhaps the Lebanese authorities should be the ones to respond. In any case, we are asking to resolve the problems of these people.
Lebanon, through local organizations and official emergency relief agencies, is also extending a helping hand.
The relief agency has begun to provide assistance, including food and medical aid, anything that these refugees need in order to withstand these several days of displacement.
The major problems of the displaced refugees are not limited to their situation, but also have to do with the camps where they have taken refuge. For example, in Burj al-Barajni camp, more than 17,000 refugees live in a camp that lacks even the most basic necessities of life. Add to this nearly 200 displaced families, a number that is expected to rise. From the Burj al-Barajni camp in southern suburb of Beirut, Salam Khudr, Al Jazeera.
Salam Khudr, Al Jazeera.
In Beirut, St. George Street, which was closed following the assassination of Rafik al-Hariri, was reopened only hours after the United Nations approved the International Tribunal.
Soon after the UN Security Council approved a resolution creating an international tribunal under Chapter 7, bulldozers, trucks, vehicles, and members of the Beirut municipality went to St. George to begin cleaning the area and paving the road. It was as if they were prepared, but only waiting for the UN Security Council's decision to immediately begin working on reopening the street, which was closed for more than 2 years following the assassination of the former Prime Minister Rafik al-Hariri. After filling the crater left by the explosion and repaving it, the street was open to passers-by with the attendance of the president of the Beirut municipality, Abdul Mun'im al-Aris, and the mayor of the city.
After the United Nations approved a resolution to form an international tribunal in New York, God willing, there will be a system in place to pursue the criminals who killed Prime Minister Hariri and his companions. Also, after the judge, Detlof Millis, completed gathering all the evidence, it became appropriate to reopen the street. The crater was filled, it will be paved, and it will open for traffic use beginning today.
The residents of the area welcomed the reopening of the street, considering it a good initiative after the UN approved the tribunal.
We have been inconvenienced for the past 2 years. Now, God willing, everything will be solved.
The investigation was over, but the street would not be reopened until the tribunal was formed.
The street opened because yesterday they announced that a tribunal would be formed.
All the procedures were completed.
They were waiting for the tribunal to pave the road and have a celebration or party.
As a way to commemorate Hariri, the late Prime Minister's family is coordinating with the municipality of Beirut to erect a memorial site for him in St. George Plaza that acknowledges his contributions to the city of Beirut. Only hours after the UN Security Council approved the International Tribunal, the city of Beirut dispatched its manpower and equipment and went out to reopen St. George Street, which was closed in order to obtain forensic evidence from the site. After 2 years have passed since the assassination of Prime Minister Hariri, has the completion of the gathering of all the evidence coincided with the approval of the tribunal?
Is peace with Syria a realistic option? That question was at the center of today's meeting of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. For more on that and other diplomatic moves, we'll go live to our Tel Aviv studio to join IBA's diplomatic correspondent, Leah Zinder. Leah?
Yes, hi Laura, hi John. It was an interesting session today. Amir Peretz, in what was probably his last appearance before the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee as Defence Minister, said it is necessary to examine, albeit cautiously, the voices of peace emanating from Syria. Peretz said Syria is an important part of the fundamentalist axis led by Iran and is a major supplier of arms to Hamas. The Defence Minister said the more Syria and Israel talk, the less chance there is of a military confrontation between the two countries. He stressed, though, that in any case, the Israel Defense Forces are vigilant and are prepared for any developments on the northern border. National Union MK Efie Tam told the committee the recent talk about the possibility of war with Syria as early as this summer is what he called spino-panic, designed, as he sees it, to undermine the national consensus over holding on to the Golan Heights. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, left-wing Meretz leader Yossi Beilin said he hoped the talk of peace with Syria was more than just political spinnery. But the question of peace with Syria is very much on the agenda of Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and his cabinet. Olmert is going to have to decide before his June 19th White House summit with US President Bush whether he will enter into peace talks with Damascus or try to move ahead on the deeply fractured and chaotic Palestinian track. Sources close to Olmert say he doesn't believe it's possible to proceed on both tracks simultaneously. But right now the Prime Minister has some urgent decisions to make. The International Peacemaking Quartet is pressuring Israel to release over $500 million in Palestinian tax revenues frozen after the Hamas election victory. That subject will be at the top of the agenda this Thursday, when Olmert will meet with Abbas for the first time, not in Jerusalem, but in the Palestinian Authority, probably, I'm told, in Jericho.
The Egyptians endured their most severe losses during the 1967 war. Israel destroyed Egypt's military airports and warplanes. After Sinai fell in the hands of the Israeli forces, the Suez Canal was closed for several years.
المساحة الأكبر التي احتلتها إسرائيل في يونيو عام 67.
The largest territory that Israel occupied in the 1967 war was the Sinai Peninsula, which was 60 square kilometers. Now about 400,000 people live there, mainly Bedouins. The Israeli occupation of the Sinai was a decisive blow to Egypt and its president Jamal Abdel Nasser, who also was the leader of the Arab nationalism movement. On July 10, 1967, he rushed to announce his resignation as a way to take responsibility for the defeat.
إعلان استقالته وتحمل مسؤولية الهزيمة.
لقد قررت أن أتنحى تماما.
I have decided to immediately step down from any official position.
أي منصب رسمي.
سيناء تضم محافظتي شمال وجنوب سيناء.
Sinai is divided into two districts, northern and southern. It is a desert area surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, the Suez Canal, the Suez Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aqaba. After the Israeli occupation of the Sinai, the strategic Suez Canal was closed for the longest period of time ever. But after the October War in 1973, the Egyptian military status in the Sinai improved. In November 1977, the Egyptian President Anwar Sadat traveled to Israel to give a speech at the Israeli Knesset, which paved the way for the Camp David Accords. These accords generated a storm of controversy in the Arab world for years. The accords also led to the 1979 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty, after which Israel withdrew from the Sinai. The treaty called for limited Egyptian military presence and for the deployment of multinational forces in Sinai. In the early 1980s, Israel completed the withdrawal of its forces from Sinai. Although Israel occupied several Arab territories in 1967, it only withdrew from Sinai. Historically, Sinai is best known for the Arish city, which has the mountainous areas of Tay and Tur, where the famous Mount Musa and Mount Qadis are located. Sarah al-Dandarawi, Al-Arabiya Television.
سارة الدندراوي العربية.
أهلا بكم من جديد. إلى تركيا حيث وافق البرلمان على انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية.
The parliament in Turkey agreed on a direct popular election of the president, a process that was previously done by the members of the parliament themselves. This amendment is part of a number of constitutional reforms presented by the ruling Justice and Development Party in response to the refusal of electing their foreign minister, Abdullah Gül, as president for the country and predecessor to Ahmadinejad Cesar. The passing of these amendments is based on general referendum, which comes after the approval of Parliament. The government of Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that this procedure will slow sufficient popular support to pass the proposed constitutional amendments.
تبنى 369 نائبا في البرلمان التركي.
369 members in the Turkish parliament recently approved a controversial constitutional amendment that allows direct popular vote to elect the president, while 22 members opposed it. The parliament passed the amendment in a first session last Monday in which 376 members approved it. In addition to the law constituting popular election of the president, the parliament also decided to reduce the term of parliamentarians from 5 to 4 years. Nonetheless, a final vote is still needed on the proposed amendments, which is expected to take place next week.
Recently, we have witnessed some violations of the law. This makes us ready for surprises, and we are ready to face them. In normal circumstances, the law says that the votes of a 367 parliament member or more are enough to make constitutional amendments.
The Parliament Speaker announced the passing of the new law based on the majority's approval and the attendance of 367 members, which exceeds the two-thirds majority. However, Parliament members in the opposing Republican People's Party who attended the voting session protested the decision and threatened to take the matter to the Constitutional Court again, which canceled the results of the presidential elections last month and which put Turkey in a difficult political situation that is still ongoing.
Truthfully, these amendments and changes in the Constitution do not please us. In spite of this, they insist on them. I was hoping that something would be done to address this, but sadly, voting was in favor of the ruling party.
After this result, the Parliament Speaker will take this decision to the current President of the Republic, Ahmadinejad Cesar, who previously used his veto power and refused to pass the law of popular elections of the President. However, this time, Cesar does not have the right to refute the law, but he can call for a public referendum to resolve this matter, which has occupied local and international opinion. The Justice and Development Party seems adamant on amending the law of presidential election in the face of those who refuse this change. But will the party endure in the face of the opposition that is supported by the secular elite? And will the Turkish voter on July 22nd have 2 ballot boxes as hoped for by Erdogan and his supporters? The observers say that nothing is impossible. For Madar Program, this is Abdil Nassar Sanji, Abu Dhabi TV, Istanbul.
لبرنامج المدار عبد الناصر سنجي قناة أبو ظبي اسطنبول.
The President of Iran is again caught in controversy, saying the countdown for Israel's destruction has started.
Iran's marking the 18th anniversary of the death of Grand Ayatollah Khomeni, known as the father of Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979.
Well, Iran's supreme leader now, Ayatollah Khomeni, paid his respects at Khomeni's shrine and said Iran wouldn't cave in to Western demands that his country stop its nuclear program.
Should the Iranian nation beg for its nuclear rights to make the bullying powers of the world accept that it has this right? No, this is not the way for a free nation.
Our Tehran correspondent Ali Reza Renahi says that Ayatollah Khamenei's speech to mark the anniversary was not as hard-hitting as in the past.
His words were not as strong and as forthcoming as we expected them to be. He has been as strong about Iran's nuclear case, saying that we will never back down on our nuclear case and we will not beg for our nuclear rights, of course. But that is not exactly what we expected him to say. We expected Iran's supreme leader to talk about Iran's negotiations with the US that are underway now, and Iran's nuclear negotiations with the EU that are underway now. But it was somehow shunned by the Supreme Leader, or let's say played down, so maybe it was an attempt to keep the atmosphere a little quiet and calm until the negotiations reach some solution.
Marking the 18th demise anniversary of the founding father of the Islamic Republic, Iranians on Monday renewed their allegiance to the late Imam Khomeni. Islamic Revolution leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei told the huge gathering at the holy shrine of Imam Khomeni in Tehran, the immortality of Imam Khomeni lies in his strong faith in God and his struggles for the sake of Islam. The leader said Iran has set the record straight about its rights and got its message across to the bullying powers that a compromise on Iran's absolute rights is out of the question. The leader said the enemy has created a fanatic group to stir division and bloodshed among Muslims, adding those who have the blood of Muslims on their hands are defying the Islamic teachings. Moving beyond Iran's national borders, admirers of the late Imam Khomeni held special ceremonies to mark his demise anniversary. People in Iraq, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Italy, Belgium, in step with other countries, honored the memory of the architect of the Islamic Republic. And June the 5th marks the anniversary of a popular uprising in Iran against the former Shah and detention of Imam Khomeni by the then ruling dictator. Back in 1963, Shah tried to mercilessly crush the Iranian nation, who, led by Imam Khomeni, were shouting for their national will, the establishment of an Islamic government. Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council Ali Larijani says U.S. claimed that the missile shield system in Europe is intended to safeguard Europe against Iranian missiles should be called, quote, the joke of the year, since Iran's missiles cannot reach Europe. Larijani said, quote, Europe is Iran's most important trade partner, so why should we ever target them? He said one might reasonably suppose that the U.S. resorts to such propaganda to divert the public opinion away from their objectives. He said it seems some Americans are suffering from a kind of political schizophrenia and do not learn lessons from the past. Czech protesters promised a noisy reception on Monday for visiting President George W. Bush and his project to deploy elements of an anti-missile shield in their country and neighboring Poland. Two main demonstrations are scheduled later today near the Prague Castle. President Bush landed in Prague a while ago for the first part of an 8-day, 6-country European tour, including a G8 summit in Germany. Smaller satellite protests and events are expected at other sites around the capital. Germany saw fresh clashes Monday between protesters and police ahead of this week's G8 summit. Skirmishes broke out in the northern city of Rostock between police and about 400 globalization activists, some of whom pelted officers with bottles during a demonstration against refugee policy in the Group of 8 Club of Rich Nations. 4 protesters were detained. It was the second outbreak of violence in the run-up to the G8 summit starting Wednesday in the nearby Baltic Sea resort of Heiligendamm, following riots Saturday in Rostock that left nearly 1,000 people injured. And deadly firefights in a Palestinian camp in South Lebanon and a bus bombing in the capital opened new fronts for the army on Monday as it battles to crush Fatah al-Islam militants in a 16-day standoff in the north of the country. 2 soldiers and 2 militants were killed and 11 wounded. Residents were plunged into panic by the gun battles between the army and militants, which first flared late Sunday near Ain al-Halwa in the southern city of Sidon. In the evening, a bomb ripped through a public bus east Beirut, wounding at least 7 people. U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Yates says Washington cannot link Tehran to flow of armies to Taliban insurgents. Yates made the remark at a joint press conference with Afghan President Hamid Karzai in Kabul on Monday, when the Afghan president reiterated there is no evidence that Iran supplied the Taliban. President Karzai noted that Tehran-Kabul ties have never been so close as they are now.
5 years ago, Afghanistan was ruled by those who called themselves the enemies of Iran and who killed their diplomats. 5 years ago, Iran's trade in Afghanistan was less than $10 million. Today, it reaches $500 million. Therefore, there's no reason that any of our neighbors should engage in supporting the Taliban or provide support to any other elements.
The European Union, United Nations and G8 President Germany have urged Washington back broader multilateral efforts to combat climate change. Europeans fear a plan announced by George W. Bush last week could sabotage efforts to forge a successor to the Kyoto Protocol under the auspices of the United Nations. Speaking in Berlin, European Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso cautioned Washington against going down a separate track.
My expectations of the European Commission is that in Heiligendamm, the issue is going to be recognized as a global challenge, and a global challenge that requires global action. I think it is possible to accept the need for action and to give an impetus, a political impetus for this process, so that we can make real progress in the future.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Feyerdahl Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.